Your life will never truly transform until you step into radical ownership, not partial ownership, not occasional ownership, not ownership when it feels convenient. Radical, unshakable, non negotiable ownership, the kind where every result, every outcome, every success, and every failure in your life somehow traces back to you. That is not an easy pill to swallow. In fact, most people avoid it because it feels heavy. But I can tell you from my own journey that this is where the freedom lies. I built a life and businesses that I am proud of, not because I had some secret advantage, not because I had the best education, or because I had everything figured out from the start. No, built it because I learned how to own every piece of it, even the setbacks, even the failures, even the parts that hurt to look at. And what I've learned after years of trial and error is that the single biggest differentiator between people who succeed and people who stay stuck is one thing: accountability. Accountability is not a pretty word. It's not glamorous. It doesn't fit well in the world of instant gratification or the culture of excuses we often live in. But it is the foundation of everything. Accountability is the bridge between desire and result, between dream and reality, between wishing and having. If you want to stop blaming the economy, your background, your lack of resources, your bad luck, even other people, then accountability is the path forward. In this journey, I'm going to walk you through 10 insights about accountability that, when truly understood and applied, can change your life, your business, your relationships, even the way you view yourself. These are not motivational sound bites. They are lived experiences, hard-won lessons, and truths that have shaped the way I lead myself and others. So let's begin. Talent is a myth. Accountability is the standard. The first thing you need to understand is this: talent is a myth. At least it's a myth in the way most people think about it. People love the idea of natural talent because it makes the world easier to explain. If someone succeeds, we like to believe they were born with a special gift. If someone fails, I like to believe they simply didn't have it. Talent becomes a convenient excuse on both sides. But here's the truth: talent doesn't matter nearly as much as accountability. I've seen this play out again and again across my portfolio of organizations. We have more than 350 team members. And if there's one consistent lesson I've learned, it's this: talent without accountability is useless. It doesn't matter how sharp someone is in an interview, how polished their resume looks, or how naturally gifted they appear to be. If they cannot hold themselves accountable, or if they cannot be held accountable by others, they will never reach their full potential. On the other hand, I've watched people with average skills, average backgrounds, and average resources absolutely skyrocket simply because they were accountable. They showed up when they said they would. They followed through when it was hard. They didn't let excuses dictate their standards. And over time, those small, consistent actions compounded into extraordinary results. The problem is that most people treat accountability like it's optional. They talk about it in a lighthearted way. They'll say, "Oh, I'm holding myself accountable today," or "I need an accountability buddy." But the truth is, accountability isn't a casual concept. It's a brutal standard. It demands discipline. It demands sacrifice. It demands that you do what you said you were going to do, even when every fiber of your being wants to quit. That's why in all of our organizations, accountability isn't just a nice to have. It's not just a word on a mission statement or a core value poster that collects dust on a wall. No, it is that standard by which we measure ourselves daily. Accountability is enforced. It's expected. It's built into the culture. And that enforcement is what separates us from companies that drown in mediocrity. Because here's the uncomfortable truth: most people do not want to be held accountable. They resist it. They dodge it. They justify their lack of follow through with stories and excuses. But the people who rise, the ones who break through, are the ones who stop negotiating with themselves and start demanding accountability as a way of life. And here's the kicker: accountability always starts with you. Accountability begins with you. This is the hard reality most leaders, entrepreneurs, and even parents struggle with. If you can't hold yourself accountable, you have no chance of holding anyone else accountable. None. Think about it. If you can't get yourself to wake up when you said you would, if you can't get yourself to the gym when you promised, if you can't finish the report you committed to, prepare for the presentation you said you'd deliver, What are the chances that you'll have the courage or the credibility to hold someone else to a standard? The answer is slim to none. That's why accountability begins with you. I've seen so many business owners frustrated with their teams. They complain, my employees don't care enough, they're lazy, they don't step up. But often the uncomfortable truth is this: the team is a mirror of the leader. If the leader lacks accountability, the team will too. If the leader cuts corners, the team will cut corners. If the leader avoids responsibility, the team will avoid responsibility. Culture trickles down, and culture is shaped by accountability. This doesn't just apply to business. Think about families. If parents say one thing but do another, if they preach discipline but live in chaos, if they demand honesty but model excuses, the children notice. Accountability is either enforced by example or eroded by hypocrisy. The same is true in friendships, in partnerships, in every circle of influence. So ask yourself, where in your life are you frustrated with the lack of accountability in others? And how might that be a reflection of your own lack of accountability? This is not an easy question to ask, but it is a necessary one. Because until you hold yourself accountable, you will never have the credibility or the confidence to enforce accountability in others. I had to learn this the hard way. Early in my career, I expected my team to show up at a high level while I was cutting corners myself. I wanted them to hit deadlines while I missed mine. I wanted them to be prepared while I was winging it. And the result was chaos. It wasn't until I drew a hard line with myself, until I became the most accountable person in the room, that my teams began to shift. People don't follow what you say, they follow what you do. That's why accountability starts inward. You must master it personally before you can lead it publicly. And when you do, everything begins to change. If accountability is the foundation of everything, you need to get crystal clear on what it actually means. Because here's the problem. Most people use the word without really understanding it. They throw it around casually. I'll be accountable, or let's keep each other accountable. But when it comes time to live it, they fall apart. The true definition of accountability is this: to be required or expected to justify your actions or decisions. Read that again: required to justify. That means if you claim you want to build a business, then every action you take should move you closer to that business. If you claim you want to improve your health, then your choices, your meals, your workouts, your sleep patterns should align with that goal. If you claim you want better relationships, then your words, your habits, your time allocation should reflect that desire. And if they don't, then you are not being accountable. Period. It's simple, but it's not easy. Imagine this. What if you had to explain every single choice you made today to someone you deeply admire? What if you had to sit across from a mentor, a coach, or even your younger self, the version of you that had big dreams, and walk them through your schedule, your actions, your decisions one by one? Would you feel proud, or would you feel embarrassed? When I get off track in my own life, this is the exercise I use. I picture myself having to justify my choices to someone I respect. I imagine putting my calendar in front of them, putting thought process on the table and saying, here's why I did what I did. And almost instantly, the truth surfaces. I know exactly which decisions would make me shrink, which actions I wouldn't want to admit, which moments were wasted. That moment of awareness is where accountability begins. It forces you to confront a gap between your words and your actions, between your goals and your choices. And that confrontation is uncomfortable, but it is also the doorway to change. See, the reason accountability is so rare is because as adults, nobody asks us to justify our actions anymore. When we're kids, we have parents, teachers, coaches constantly check us. Why didn't you finish your homework? Why were you late to practice? Why didn't you clean your room? Accountability is built into our environment. But as we grow up, that structure fades. Nobody demands an explanation anymore. And without that pressure, most people drift. But here's the catch. Just because nobody is asking doesn't mean the standard disappears. Life has a way of holding you accountable, whether you like it or not. If you don't manage your money, the bills will hold you accountable. If you don't take care of your health, your body will hold you accountable. If you don't commit to growth in your career, your lack of opportunities will hold you accountable. Reality enforces accountability, whether or not you choose to. The question is, will you enforce it first? will you choose to justify your actions before life forces you to face the consequences? That's why defining accountability clearly matters. It's not about perfection. It's not about never making a mistake. It's about living in such alignment with your goals that at any given moment, you could justify your actions, not with excuses, but with reasons that actually move you forward. And here's the truth: if you don't have what you want in life, whether it's the job, the income, the body, the relationships, it is not because the universe conspired against you. It's because your actions and your decisions have not consistently aligned with your goals. That's it. That's the whole story. And while that might sting, it's also empowering because it means the solution is simple: change your actions, change your decisions, and everything else will follow. Accountability is the bridge between your current reality and your desired reality, and you are the only one who can build it. Disappointment versus shame, the emotional side of accountability. Now, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood aspects of accountability: the emotions that come with it. Because here's the truth: holding yourself accountable is heavy. It forces you to confront your own shortcomings, your own excuses, your own missed opportunities. And if you don't understand how to process that weight, it can crush you. The two emotions most often tied to accountability are disappointment and shame. And while they might feel similar on the surface, they are worlds apart in how they affect your growth. Shame is toxic. Shame is the painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the belief that you are wrong, broken, or foolish. Shame says, I failed, therefore I am a failure. Shame paralyzes. Shame convinces you that you're unworthy, that you'll never get it right, that you might as well give up. And if accountability slips into shame, it stops being helpful and starts being destructive. Disappointment, on the other hand, is powerful. Disappointment is the sadness or displeasure caused by not yet meeting your expectations or goals. Notice the difference. Disappointment says, I failed, but I can try again. I missed the target, but I can aim better next time. Disappointment motivates. Disappointment fuels hunger. Disappointment keeps you striving. If you're going to be a highly accountable person, you must learn to distinguish between the two. You must train yourself to feel disappointment without slipping into shame. Because here's the reality: every high performer, every leader, every successful person you admire has lived in cycles of disappointment. They're constantly setting bigger goals than they've achieved. They're constantly striving for more. And because of that, they are constantly aware of the gap between where they are and where they want to be. That gap feels like disappointment. I'll never forget when I heard a story about a couple who, by all external measures, had made it. They had wealth, influence, a thriving family, businesses that reached millions of people. And yet, in a private conversation, they admitted they still asked themselves, when are we really going to make it? At first, I was shocked. From the outside, it looked like it had already arrived. But then I realized that is the mindset of accountability. No matter how much they had achieved, they still felt disappointed because their vision was bigger than their current reality. That moment changed the way I viewed disappointment. I realized it wasn't a sign of failure. It was a sign of growth. It was a sign that I was aiming higher than where I currently stood. And end of letting disappointment spiral into shame, I began to embrace it as fuel. So here's the lesson. If you're feeling disappointed that you're not yet where you want to be, that's good. That means you're accountable to your goals. That means you're paying attention. That means you're still hungry. But don't confuse that disappointment with shame. Shame tells you to quit. Disappointment tells you to keep going. Accountability isn't about never feeling disappointed. It's about choosing disappointment over shame again and again. Because when you learn to live with disappointment as a companion, you stop fearing the gap and start chasing the growth. Now that we've cleared up what accountability is and how it should feel, let's dig into the single most transformative practice you can adopt, asking yourself, how is this my fault? I know that question can sound harsh. It can sound unfair, especially in situations where you were clearly wronged, overlooked, or even blindsided. But hear me out. This question is about beating yourself up. It's not about wallowing in guilt or taking on responsibility for things that truly aren't within your control. The purpose of the question is to uncover what part you can control, what you can change, and what part you must own if you want to grow. Here's the problem most people face. When something goes wrong, their first instinct is to point outward. They blame the economy, their boss, their spouse, their parents, their team, the government, the weather, their lack of resources, you name it. The finger is always pointed away. And maybe in some cases, those external factors really did play a role. But you stop there. If you let the blame end outside of you, you lose all your power. Because if it's someone else's fault, then you're just a victim. And if you're a victim, then you're powerless. The question, how is this my fault, flips that script. It forces you to look inward. It challenges you to find the lesson, the action, the decision, the blind spot that you can own. And when you find it, you take back control. Let me give you an example from my own career. Early on, I found myself caught in a disastrous legal contract. The terms were terrible. The outcome cost us millions. And truth was, I wasn't even the one who signed the contract. I wasn't directly involved in the negotiations. At first, it would have been easy for me to say, this wasn't my fault. This was handled by someone else. I wasn't even in the room. And technically, that was true. But if I stopped there, what would have changed? Nothing. I would have stayed powerless. Instead, I asked myself, how is this my fault? And the answer hit me hard. Nobody thought to include me in the legal process because I had never made myself valuable in that arena. Nobody viewed me as someone with expertise in contracts or law. So, of course, they didn't bring me in. That was my fault. My lack of preparation, my lack of initiative, my lack of intent in that area was the reason I wasn't at the table. Once I saw it that way, I knew what I had to do. I spent months studying contracts, learning legal terms, digging into the details. I spent 2 to 3 hours every night reading, researching, asking questions, clarifying concepts until I could walk into any negotiation and add value. Was it fun? Absolutely not. It was tedious. It was frustrating, but it was necessary. And it gave me back my power. Never again would I be excluded from decisions that could make or break my organization. That's the end of the question. How is this my fault? It shifts you from powerless to powerful. It takes you out of victimhood and places you back in the driver's seat. Even when something isn't directly your fault, there is always some way you could have prepared better, learned more, positioned yourself differently, or influenced the outcome. And if you're willing to own that, you grow. Now, let me be clear. This doesn't mean you should blame yourself for everything that happens in life. It doesn't mean you carry shame for things beyond your control. If someone betrays you, if tragedy strikes, if circumstances truly blindside you, don't spiral into guilt. The purpose of the question isn't punishment, it's empowerment. It's not about fault in the moral sense. It's about ownership in the practical sense. So the next time something doesn't go the way you hoped, resist the urge to point outward. Pause. Ask yourself, how is this my fault? And watch how quickly your perspective shifts. Instead of being stuck, you'll see a path forward. Instead of feeling powerless, you'll feel capable. Instead of waiting for others to change, you'll realize you can change yourself. That's the essence. Radical accountability. Let's move to the next layer, the emotional cost of accountability. Because make no mistake, ownership is expensive. It costs you comfort. It costs you excuses. It costs you the ability to hide behind blame. And if you're not prepared to pay that cost, accountability will crush you. Here's what I mean. When you commit to accountability, you commit to looking at yourself honestly. No sugarcoating, no rationalizing, no, but you don't understand my situation. Just truth. And the truth often hurts. It forces you to see the gap between who you are and who you want to be. It exposes the laziness, the procrastination, the half-hearted efforts you'd rather ignore. It demands that you confront your own weaknesses head on. Most people aren't willing to do that. It's easier to look away. It's easier to distract yourself. It's easier to blame. That's why accountability feels so rare, because the emotional toll is too high for most people to pay. I remember one of my earliest leadership experiences and how this lesson slapped me in the face. I had just hired my first team member, a guy who looked incredible on paper, had the MBA, the polish, the articulation. He seemed like the kind of person who could help me run a new leadership development program. We were launching for months. We planned, we prepped, we worked. Finally, the day of the big event arrived. Clients were flying in. The pressure was on. There were a million moving parts that morning, and just an hour before the event was set to begin, I realized we had left some crucial items behind, so I had to run to Target to grab them. That meant I needed my new hire to step up, to manage the hotel, to greet clients, to keep things flowing while I was gone. It was his moment to lead. But as I was calling him, waiting for my ride to pull around, I looked across the lobby and saw him ignoring my call, laughing, climbing up the stairs to the water slide at the hotel's indoor water park. In that moment, my blood boiled. I couldn't believe it. Here we were, minutes away from hosting clients, and my brand new hire was acting like he was on vacation. I was furious. But instead of confronting him directly, instead of holding him accountable, I swallowed my anger and did his job for him. I scrambled to handle everything myself. That decision haunted me because in avoiding the conflict and refusing to hold him accountable, I weakened myself. I sent a message to him and to myself: accountability was optional. And the emotional toll of that avoidance was heavy. For years, I repeated that pattern, doing other people's jobs, silently resenting them, but never addressing the issue head on. It wasn't until I realized that my avoidance was a lack of accountability in myself that things changed. I wasn't just failing to hold him accountable, I was failing to hold me accountable. Wasn't being honest about my fear of confrontation. I wasn't owning the fact that I would rather suffer in silence than demand standards. It was on me, and until I faced it, my leadership stalled. That's the emotional cost of ownership. You have to call yourself out. You have to look in the mirror and admit the truth, even when it hurts. You have to hold yourself to the same higher standard that you demand from others. It is not easy. It will feel heavy, but that weight is what makes you stronger. Because here's the paradox: accountability costs you in the short term, but it pays you in the long term. Yes, it's uncomfortable to confront yourself. Yes, it's painful to admit you fall short. Yes, it's exhausting to consistently hold the line. But that pain produces growth. That weight produces strength. That exhaustion produces resilience. And without it, you stay weak. So the question becomes, are you willing to pay the price? Are you willing to carry the weight of ownership? Because if you are, accountability will transform you. But if you're not, then you'll stay stuck in the cycle of blame, excuses, and mediocrity. One of the greatest lies people believe about accountability is that it's a one-time decision. They think, if I commit once, then I'm set. If I make the promise, if I set the deadline, if I declare it publicly, then the momentum will just carry me. That couldn't be further from the truth. Accountability is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice. It's like brushing your teeth, eating food, or working out. If you skip a day, the consequences might not show immediately, but skip enough days and the decay sets in. Think about it. How many times have you made a resolution, told yourself this time is different, and then fallen back into old habits within weeks? Was it because you didn't want the result badly enough? No, it was because you thought the commitment you made once would somehow carry you forever. You forgot that accountability has to be rebuilt every single morning. So that's the reality. Accountability leaks. It fades. It dissolves with time. Yesterday's commitment won't hold you today. Yesterday's discipline won't get you through tomorrow. Every new day demands a new decision. And this is why so many people never see long-term change. They live off the high of a single decision instead of cultivating the habit of repeated decisions. They say, I'll start the diet Monday. I'll work on my book this weekend. I'll build my business this year. And they feel good just saying it. But the next day, when the alarm clock rings, when the cravings hit, when the distractions pile up, they don't recommit. They don't rebuild the accountability. And without that, everything falls apart. The people who truly succeed aren't the ones who made the loudest commitment once. They're the ones who quietly remake the commitment every day. They wake up and say, today I will hold myself accountable. Again, they do it tomorrow and the next day and the next. That's why accountability is so demanding. It's not something you conquer once and move on from. It's something you fight for every single morning. And the second you stop fighting, it starts slipping. So let me ask you, what practices do you have in place to rebuild accountability daily? Do you review your goals every morning? Do you write down your priorities before you start? Hey, Do you journal honestly about whether you kept your promises yesterday? Do you check your calendar against your values? Because if you don't have daily rituals that reinforce accountability, you're relying on memory and willpower. And let me tell you, those are weak foundations. Your willpower will fade, your memory will get fuzzy. Without structure, accountability collapses. This is why successful people build accountability systems. They track their workouts, they set reminders, they check in with coaches, they write down their non negotiables. They don't leave it to chance. They make accountability visible, daily, measurable. So if you're serious about accountability, don't just make the big declarations, build the small daily reinforcements. Because accountability isn't about proving yourself once, it's about proving yourself every day. Now, here's the beautiful part. When you commit to accountability daily, something incredible happens. It starts to compound. You know how compound interest works in finance? You invest a little consistently, and over time, the growth snowballs. The earlier you start, the bigger the payoff becomes. $1 becomes 10, 10 becomes 100, and eventually, your wealth multiplies far beyond what you put in. Accountability works the same way. At first, it feels like your efforts barely matter. You make the hard choice to wake up early, but nobody notices. You stick to your diet for a week, but your body doesn't look different. You put in extra hours on your side hustle, but the results don't show. And in that stage, it's tempting to quit. It feels like you're paying the tis of accountability without reaping the rewards. But here's the truth. Every act of accountability builds momentum. Every choice you make in alignment with your goals deposits something into your growth account. And while you might not see the return immediately, it's accumulating, it's stacking, it's compounding beneath the surface. Then one day it breaks through. Suddenly the weight you've been losing becomes visible. Suddenly the business you've been grinding on starts producing real income. Suddenly relationships you've been investing in bear fruit. People on the outside call it overnight success, but you know the truth. It was years of compounded accountability, finally reaching critical mass. The opposite is true too. Every time you break accountability, every time you let yourself slide, you withdraw from your growth account, and those withdrawals compound as well. Skip one workout. It doesn't seem like a big deal. Eat one bad meal. It feels harmless. Miss one day of writing. It doesn't look catastrophic. But stack enough of those withdrawals, and suddenly your health is gone. Your dream project is abandoned. Your opportunities have vanished. That's why accountability isn't neutral. It's either building for you or against you. Every choice you make is either a deposit or a withdrawal. And over time, the compounding effect determines your future. I'll give you an example. Early in my leadership journey, I met someone who was incredibly talented, smart, charismatic, full of potential, but he had a habit of cutting corners. He was late to meetings. He missed deadlines. He always had an excuse. And at first, it didn't seem to matter. His talent carried him. He still impressed people. He still landed opportunities. But over time, the withdrawals compounded. The missed commitments piled up. The lack of accountability caught up to him. And eventually, his reputation collapsed. Doors closed. Trust evaporated. Potential wasted. Contrast that with another leader I knew, someone who wasn't as flashy, wasn't as naturally gifted, but she was accountable, always on time, always prepared, always delivering what she promised. At first, nobody noticed her. She wasn't the star of the show, but over time, her deposits compounded. People trusted her, opportunities opened. She built influence, credibility, and impact. And years later, she had far surpassed the talented guy simply because she was consistent in accountability. That's the secret most people miss. Accountability isn't about intensity. It's about consistency. It's not the one dramatic act of discipline that changes your life. It's the small daily deposits compounded over years that build a life of strength, integrity, and success. So if you want to know your future, look at your accountability today, not the promises you make once in a while, not the declarations you post online, but the choices you repeat day after day, because those choices are compounding. And whether you realize it or not, they're shaping the trajectory of your entire life.